So one of the things if you come here for seeing hardcore AI, mathematics, Python modeling or JavaScript modeling, you'll be disappointed because there's very little of that in this presentation today. One of the things that I've been doing all that, and I've been doing some pretty cool math, but one of the questions I come back to is, how does AI resonate with my mom, about 70 years old, with my sister, who's about 35? How does this resonate? How does it resonate with our dads, with somebody who's non-tech, just happens to use it or have heard about it? I mean, it's pretty important for us because when we develop stuff for this, we develop it usually from the prospect of being a hardcore developer, having a really cool and fun time coding or hacking and creating an application which does something intelligent, create convenience as we would like to have the convenience. But we hardly or rarely stop up and ask ourselves, is it also really what people need? We know that most coders are male. We know that most coders that develop AI at the moment, probably 80–90%, are men that develop something that they would like, that they would feel convenient. So what about the other half, or maybe the better half? Do they really appreciate what some of us are developing for them? So all these kind of questions has been very important to me, which is, you could say, it's a bit strange because my background in physics and mathematics, and sort of, why should I care about all these more softer things? But I really think they are important. Maybe it's because I'm a fish, I don't know. We will see. So there's no doubt that technology really has made tremendous steps over the last 10, 15 years. A lot of that has been fed by the computing power increase we've seen. Computing has gotten a lot cheaper, actually ridiculously cheap to what it was 10, 15, 20 years. And it's much more accessible than it used to be, right? Internet, we are connected, usually with a pretty good bandwidth, so we don't need necessarily to invest in all this stuff. We can run it in the cloud, can run it in AWS, and you can do some pretty cool stuff. More and more libraries is available to us, so we can build pretty advanced applications without knowing all the deep thing that goes below these libraries, right? So this makes it pretty easy. Machine learning, natural language processing, bots that we interact with, it becomes more and more sophisticated. Systems that can understand our voice and translate. By the way, I really do not recommend that if you're recording somebody when it's a windy day and then tries to have it translated from English to Hungarian. That's a bad thing to do. What comes out of that is not so good. So there's still some way to go. Rules-based systems, robotics, and basically managing and making our life more and more convenient. So there's really it's a lot of things happening there, and it's amazing. When I started out, I think I built my first neural network back in the end of the 80s, and I was a physicist at that time, and I was interested in could it help me solve some of the problems I was struggling with. And yes, it could, but only so far, and then whatever computing power I had at that time basically was not good enough to get any further, so we stopped. And then we went into this AI winter that everybody talks about, and now supposedly it's over. So what's happening today is more and more is going into the internet. And actually anything you have in the physical world, you could duplicate, you could have a digital twin in the online. And of course, part of that is accessible to us, but it's also accessible to a lot of others. Some will be friendly actors, and some might even be hostile actors, right? I'll come back to some of that later on, particularly when you look at privacy, particularly when you look at some of the nefarious issues around AI and digital media, or digital domain in general. And I also, so one of the things that also I've asked myself is, so yeah, okay, how does my mom think about that? How does my friends that is not in this tech think about this? But also, how does millennial think about this? I want to understand my millennial daughter. That's a hard job. It's probably even more difficult than understanding AI, to be quite honest. And I also have a three-year-old daughter, and I have a 6-year-old son that is all the time on YouTube and doing all kind of things that absolutely was out of the question when I was at that age. I mean, we had I think, first color TV came some years after I was able to read. I'm not that old, by the way, but anyway, that's a good story. So just the second aspect is that if you look at technology we have today, much of what is, not much, but some of what's developed is really to augment our own capabilities, right? It's really a collaboration. I'm putting some stuff up here. the car that in principle can drive itself, although it's maybe good still to keep a bit of eye on the road, as Tesla has experienced. You have cooking machines, and the cooking machine is something I find really cool. Some years ago, when our kids were too young, we always struggled. We didn't feel we actually got the right food, and we went out and bought a cooking robot. And the cool thing about a cooking robot is that you basically just put all the ingredients in, and it cooks your meal. And it does it a lot faster than if you are having a child on one arm, a husband on the other arm, and trying to juggle all that for sure. So my wife got really interested in this, and to be honest, after we got this, we actually got a lot more healthier food. You maybe cannot look at see it on me, and the problem is I like beer and wine too much. But I mean, in general, my wife and my kids at least are healthy. And the cool thing is, what does she do? She looks up on the internet and she says, oh, this looks really good. So it looks really good. So click a button, Wi-Fi to the home cooker, the whole recipe is coming up, and she follows the recipe. And the next step, of course, is to have one of these things that starts actually doing and juggling the pots and pans itself. One of the things that I'm very excited about is I have quite a substantial hearing impairment is a cochlear implant that actually with electrodes go into the brain. After some time, the brain is actually able to process the sound that come out of that, the waves that comes out of that, and actually start hearing. I think it's fantastic. There are devices today that allows people that are blind to actually start seeing, and again, the brain somehow takes that signal and is able to process this into what is a real picture, even if these people haven't been able to see before. There's some of the more, I don't know, scary things that you can actually make a copy of your brain and basically digitally put that at storage until somebody knows how to process that data. The side effect of that next thing, if you look it up, is actually that, well, that's the last thing you do in life. Once you've done that, you're pretty much dead. Or at least you don't have a brain any longer. Neuronics, which is basically trying to build nanobots that goes into the brain, interacts with the neurons, interact with the pathways in your brain, and is supposed to enhance it. And of course, you have Elon Musk, who is very much into this sort of augmentation, particularly of your mind, trying to boost your intelligence or your knowledge. So that's all this. So this is definitely happening. So the question, of course, is when you have this is, so what is actually that makes us smart? And it's quite an interesting. So if you look over this period here, which spans quite a lot of years. You go to we were probably closer to the apes. You go into Homo sapiens. Up here, this is the Neanderthals, and you sort of have the peak. And actually, if you look over the last, let me just put some things up here. So this is where we have the modern ape, and this is sort of the last 30,000 years. It's not a linear scale, by the way. So what will happen to us as we get more and more reliable, relying on intelligent algorithms, on digitalization of our lives, brain augmentations? Will we transcend or will we descend? I think is often the question, right? So I put human 3.0 roughly around where we are supposed to have a singularity, where super AI is going to take over and the world changes forever. Well, if you look currently on the trend here, we might actually have a lot less brain volume at that time, particularly as we are getting more relying on other things. And there's not so much surprise in that, because if you have something that actually solves all the problems for you in the world, you should ask yourself, what happens to your brain when, for example, you don't have to drive, don't have to do a bike because something can do that for you. You don't do math, you don't do calculus any longer because something will do it. It can do it much better for you. You don't have to spell because somebody can actually spell better than you. So why should you spell? Why should you read? Write? I don't know how many in here write Christmas letters any longer. I should not put my hand up. We have a hardcore here. This is the old-fashioned, right? Yeah, I tried that, but then then we have another one. Sorry?
Does email count?
Yeah, exactly. And then you just type it in, right? But handing with the hand is getting really more and more difficult, at least for me. I mean, I start taking some courses. I like to take notes. It's coming back, but writing with the hand is difficult for many of us because we don't do it every day any longer. solve complex problems. Why on earth should I solve complex problems any longer? Because I have a computer. I might even have at some point an advanced computer that I can tell, oh, please solve that math problem, solve that business problem for me, and it does that, and it probably does it much faster than me, and maybe even much better. So actually, what happens to your brain when it does, it's not too surprising, or it wouldn't be too surprising to see that actually cognitively, to the brain volume, you probably don't need as much as you used to do when you had to run away from a tiger, or you were in a tribe and fighting another tribe or trying to solve some real world problems. So a cool guy said that over time, I think we'll probably see closer merger between the biological intelligence and the digital, or the digital intelligence. So the gray matter and the digital matter, silicon is basically merging, or whatever that would be. And of course, that guy was Elon Musk, who is spending quite a lot of money on this brain interface that's supposedly going to boost our intelligence. He might actually pull it off. So all that is just a sort of preamp to what about us? How do we feel about that? Not just maybe not us hardcore guys or girls who are really interested in this and do super cool things with that. We can. I mean, I still don't understand this about the cat thing, but I mean, obviously somebody must have had a cat fetish when they started out with that, to have Google computers struggling through millions and millions of records of YouTube data of cats, and this AI figuring out ultimately, well, cat is something that is hairy and says meow. Okay, cool. But I mean, of course, there are much more about that. So what about us? How do we feel about that? So surprisingly, as you will see, we're not too worried about our jobs yet. Although there's been a lot in the news, but I guess you might be selective in how you read this news, and we know that millennials in particular are very selective about what they read and how they read it. But okay, don't forget about millennials. Think about me as I don't know if you want to think about me as your dad or whatever you want, your favorite uncle, but somebody at my age, which is sort of above the 40 or 35 and up, who has a job today, and when this is going to hit us, might actually hit our job. Because it's no longer just the milkman that loses his job because actually now you can go and buy the milk in the supermarket or something like that, but it's probably also some of the more intelligent things that's happening. And actually some research done is about 45% of the jobs is going to be taken over by AI or robotics, or impacted in some way or another over the next decade or two. This is one of the most frequently quoted studies. IBM has also done something that seems to be substantially more positive, but I see this a little bit like the tobacco industry telling us that smoking a cigarette is something that's cool and great for you and healthy for you. So I don't know if we can trust them. That's probably like Facebook telling us that social media is the best and most healthy thing you've ever seen in this world, right? So maybe they're a bit biased. So there is this, and certainly if you look at China, there is no doubt that in low-cost economies where you used to have a lot of manual labor, where manual labor made economically good sense, these manual labors are massively sent out of the factories and back to the rural areas as robots and intelligent automation is taking over the production lines. Now, that's still cool for us because, you know, it's not our job that disappeared, and actually the stuff we buy is becoming cheaper. And as we know, stuff that comes out of China is no longer just low-quality junk, but it's actually something that most of us would like, and it doesn't impact our job. But in China, this is already happening. So what about trust? So I think we have a lot of examples of, and this is what you will see when it comes to millennials, but I think in general, all of us, is we are getting a bit more suspicious about what we read and what we see. I think we don't need to have read a lot of news in terms of the Facebook debacle and then the Cambridge Analytics about our information, private information, being used in nefarious ways of trying to impact our emotions, impact how we think about things, and possibly also impact elections. I think the Brexit might be a good example. At least there has been, at least somebody have tried to get us to think differently about this, maybe. Funny enough, in the Brexit, I think it was more old folks like me that got convinced that we shouldn't be part of, Britain shouldn't be part of EU rather than the young people. But let's think about that. We have the guy up there we all know. We have Mr. Putin, who is, I think, a cold and screwed operator that I wouldn't trust too much. But the interesting thing is actually, apart from this trust issue that is breaking out, that if you look at the world today, we are getting increasingly more dependent on digitalization and technology, far, far more than what we used to be, because it creates a lot of convenience for us. It makes our life simpler. It makes us connected to pretty much everybody. I mean, a very good friend of mine, after this whole thing with Facebook came out, said, no, I'm going off Facebook. I'm never going to touch Facebook again. 2 weeks after, he was back. Sorry, guys, I miss you. Where are you? So it just shows how unbelievably difficult it is once you get used to something that truly is convenient, something that connects with you, like your friends all over the world, particularly if you are an international. It's very, very hard to stop that again once it's all moved. At the same time, and that's something I see also in my survey, and as you will see here, people are also getting a bit more, don't really trust this shit as they used to do. Something there that, maybe we have to be more careful. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen the latest on Facebook where it puts on, well, by the way, we're doing data science and and this is how we use your data, and if you want, well, please, you can actually completely customize what data will go where. I don't know how many of you just clicked, yeah, okay, good, go away, I want to see the picture of my grandmother's cat. Probably most of you did that. I did that because, it's annoying, I was busy, and I was thinking, oh, hang on a minute. This is Facebook's way of telling the politicians, we have done everything in this world to tell our products, which is us, we are Facebook's products, right? That, oh, by the way, we use data science to have an idea what you are. We make a profile on you. We don't sell it, by the way, because this is somebody else who does that. But we're pretty much knowing everything about you. But that's okay. That's okay, no worries. So I don't know how often before people see me or hear my voice, so Kim is a woman. I'm getting surprised, right? You take the phone and say, it's Kim. Deep silence. Huh? That's Kim. Also, okay, this is Larsen. Ah, okay. So we are all biased. All of us are biased in one way or another. Even if we don't believe, or even if you don't want to believe, how many of us, when I tell you about a nurse, you see the picture of a woman? Right? It's normal. If you hear about a doctor, do you see the picture of a woman or do you see a picture of a man? I would bet most of you have a kind of automatically a man in your head. And so forth. When you talk about cooking, I just told you about cooking, and I was completely stereotyping my wife, who is in the kitchen cooking, having a baby in one arm and her husband in the other, right? So I'm stereotyping as well. I'm absolutely biased. And that might be all okay, but because we are human beings and some of this we cannot do anything about, but when bias hurts people. So there is a brilliant study, and I would recommend everybody to go to ProPublica, who's done a lot on machine bias and risk assessment on what machine learning can do wrong. And there's this picture here about Bricia and about Vernon. The system gives you high risk for her, it's about 8, and a low risk for Vernon. I don't know if you look at these two pictures, what do you think of it? Does it sound reasonable? Well, she's black. She doesn't look too happy there. I don't know about Vernon. I mean, actually, Vernon looks a bit more scary to me than Tricia, but no, I mean, she could be really a mean operator, right? You don't know. You know what she did? She was 18. She stole a children's bike in a white neighborhood to try to get to an appointment. A lady on neighbor watch saw her running with a bike, and police took her and she went to jail. That's what you do in the US. This guy knocked an old lady unconscious, stole her bag, ran away with it, and well, they catched him, a serial criminal. He got into jail, but the system still ranks him lower than Tricia. Is this fair? Actually, if you hadn't the color, if you didn't have the racial profile, but simply the two stories without knowing that Tricia, most likely from a name perspective, probably is black, and Vernon, he must be somebody out of a rich neighborhood, right? That's the name. You would probably say that she's the lowest risk. And indeed, when you go back and look, okay, he is a repeat offender. Some time after he got out before her. He repeat offended. Of course, it's easy to find single events, single things in all of the data we have that proves your point. But actually, it's again and again been proved that these kind of systems are biased. And why are they biased? Because of the way they've been fed, because of the way the models have been trained. So thinking about bias and thinking about ethics is very important. But if you look about that, and you are a person of color or you're a woman, you should justifiably be suspicious about what machine learning tools gives you as a result. That's the message here. And there are many examples. I've given some examples up here that proves this quite consistently. And of course, as AI becomes more and more complex in terms of the algorithms and architectures we use, in order to actually squeeze out more and more performance, it also becomes less and less transparent what actually happens inside there. In the old days, where we did a GLM, a general linear model, or something fairly simple, like a tree, a boosted tree, or whatever you want to use for an algorithm, it was a bit more transparent what happened to your data as it went through this algorithm. With deep learning and deep learning processes, this becomes increasingly more difficult to understand, at least if you're a lay person or even if you're just an average expert. So, it's a lot of preamp, but I always heard the foreplay was a good thing. So I did a survey. Actually, I've done 4 surveys. The last one I did just recently was particularly on millennials, because I got more and more interest in how does young people, although millennials actually are no longer that young, right? I mean, the oldest millennials would be around 38 to 40, which is almost my age, almost. Most of this, and I apologize for this, but that is the easiest if you use SurveyMonkey. Most of the paid surveys there are actually US-based. I've seen some data also from Europe that indicates that in some of the questions asked here are not that different from Europe. And I think you will see some of that. And so I also had 430 social media, but to be very honest, that's extremely biased sample because it's people I know on LinkedIn. So they are all sort of in telecom or they've previously been studying and fooling around with physics and mathematics. So it's a pretty biased sample. I will not tell you how many, but also there is a sample there for my company, Magyar Telekom. I will not tell how many of this is in this number. It could be very interesting for you to know that, but I'll not go there. You can do A/B testing, and it can squeeze out some pretty cool and fun stuff, but that all is in the detail. So the survey 1 and 2 is US population. The first 2 ones were done on 18 to 75-year-olds with a house income of 75K, which is substantially higher than the average income. So the average income actually is roughly around 58K per annum. So I'm above that. Roughly about 30% of the US population household would have an income around that. Why did I do that? Because initially I was very interested in decision making. So if we use AI or intelligent algorithms for decisions, how do decision makers think about that? Most of them, if you look at their educational level, if you look at their income level and experience level, should in principle be fairly cool operators, rational beings, understanding what decisions are, a lot of experience with human decisions. So I thought, let me do that first, just to understand that, because we have a lot of discussions inside our company, but also in general society. What happens when you use AI to augment your decisions? Well, do you trust that? Don't you trust that? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? So go into that. I then did something for the whole of the US population to try to see if you take away this high income group, are people having differences in their opinion about AI? The lower income group might be more skeptical because they might be more afraid of their job, etc. So, and then finally the 80 to 40 years old, the millennials. So it gives you it, and I think we will share the presentation, right? Something to, you will find a reference to a blog, some articles. So the first question is, how often do you believe that you are being exposed to AI? There are a few ones who believe they are always, and they might actually be right, but we don't really know that. No such agency and some other organizations that we cannot name might be following always, but maybe that's a bit bit of a either very optimistic or very pessimistic look, but about, let's say, 40-ish%, in the net close to 50% is always or frequently. So people in general, and by the way, there are no gender difference there. If you're a man or a woman, you have pretty much the same perception or idea about how often are you exposed to AI. Well, that is actually, I don't know if it's surprising or interesting, but it shows that people are aware that technology is monitoring them. They are using them both for positive things as well as for negative things. So how do we feel about AI? So I don't know how many in here love AI, love the concept of AI. How many in here hate AI? Nobody hates them. Huh? I guess that's why you're here. Otherwise you would start being worried. That's why I only have a T-shirt on today. If you have any Rotten Tomatoes with you, I can wash this. So actually, if you are a woman, if you go in and read my blog, there are more details below negative, because I do start with hate, which is a very emotional term, but also being afraid of AI, skeptical. So I have different gradations there. So it's about 18%. I should also say that by time, so this is done back in 2017, and I've done some new surveys over in 18, you see a noticeable trend of more negative sentiment over just this period from November to March this year. And it's not surprising, because there are more and more negative press around AI and the dangers of AI and the bias of AI. And obviously Facebook hasn't really helped, right? So it's not too surprising. And men, we are super enthusiastic about AI. There's coolness in it, right? Yeah. I must admit, for me myself, I'm totally here. I'm positive, and actually the interesting thing is, men really love AI. It's a really cool title, right? Men love AI. Women, not so much when it comes to love. But okay, I saw in here that there was not a really statistical representative sample, I guess, but so I don't know. So what happens if you have a child below 18 years old? Not so much if you are a woman. Something that comes out of all of this is, if you are a woman, you're a little bit more skeptical about AI. You're not really sure. Yes, there are lots of women who are very positive about it, but you also find the other area in terms of, let's just wait and see. Now look what happens to men. Isn't that fantastic? Men who has young children are even more positive about AI. Look at this, right? Isn't that fantastic? I think the explanation here is all about hormones. We all know how we as men change when we have a young child, and we get all cuddly. The male hormones are actually falling to the floor, and all kind of things are happening to a man that just becomes in love with his child. And the interesting thing is often actually that when you have young children, as a man, you tend to be much more positive about your children. Do not complain about my child. My child is absolutely the most brilliant, smartest person. Doesn't have any problems. Why do I say that? Because I had this incident with my wife, and I was called to the school, and the teacher wanted to talk about our son. It's a problem. So, it cannot be. Come on, this is my son. Of course it cannot be a problem, right? Look at the dad. And my wife was a bit more, this is really, Kim, you have to take this serious. Oh, okay, I'm serious. Ha ha ha. No, and then the teacher said to me, actually to my wife, because I think I couldn't be convinced there was something wrong. Just ignore him. It's common knowledge, and there's a lot of statistics and research there, that men with young children just cannot see the faults of their children. And of course, I got pretty offended. Come on, I'm an educated person. I think I'm very objective here. My son is the best in the whole world. There are no other sons as good as him, etc. So I said, that cannot be true. And I went back actually in research, and it is true. Men getting children, they just change. So this is sort of pretty standard thing, but it's still already interesting that there is this difference between gender. And again, keep always in mind that most of us men in AI, in product development, are strangely enough, men. Developing for 50-something% of the population was women. Do we really know what you guys want? Yeah, of course we do. We are men. We know everything, right? So, pretty cool. I've done a lot of studies about how does income depend on this? How does age depend on this? I should say, so first of all, this has changed a lot over the last 5-6 months. The interesting thing is if you have quite a high income, you do get statistically significantly less negative and more positive. Across this scale, there are some differences, but you have to be a bit careful with the statistics here because it's not, apart from this one here versus this income group here, the rest are probably difficult to say whether they're really statistically different or not. So this shows, I mean, if you're hyper rich and probably don't care of anything, 200,000 plus income, why should I care? I probably own the AI, right? If you're down here in the middle income, your job might actually be the one that is on the line for this stuff. So yes, you are a bit more negative. I'm actually at the moment really pursuing this and trying to go into more deeper details to try to squeeze out, getting more data to see why some of this is the case. Is it because 200 plus already own the AI, and is it Mark Zuckerberg who cares about AI? I mean, I own the AI, or what's going on here, right? So another thing that actually, so this thing that men and women, or particularly men, are having a very different opinion, and it changes quite substantially when you get a child. It was interesting to see again. So if you think about AI, you think about your child. How do you think that? Sorry, if you think about AI, how do you think the future of your child would be? What in terms of job, in terms of income? And if you're a woman which doesn't have any children, younger than 18, roughly about 51% would say it's better than, or much better than today. I should say that if you try to do this on millennials, so not just the whole age group, but pretty much everybody, so if you do that with millennials, you do get a quite more negative view than what you see here. If it's men, again, you have quite similar, actually there's no real big difference between men and women here, not statistically significant. So I would say there might be sort of a little bit lower impression about the future than if you are a woman, but it's pretty much the same. Now, if you have a child, again, not too big a difference. You seem to get a little bit more optimistic, but keep in mind, let's look here, you are also, so you're really having this division. So instead of being neutral, you go either that you think it could actually be worse, and there's a slight move upwards. But again, be careful with the samples, they're not totally statistical significant. And then look at men. 45 being similar or a bit more pessimistic. Again, bang. 63% actually thinks it will be better or much better than yesterday. So again, just proving that, I don't know if we are suckers, but at least we are a lot more positive in terms of the future when it comes to our children. So try to go into that. Again, as you see this move forward in time, you do see the sentiment moving slightly downwards, not so much neutral, but more on the polarization. So I would say that there are certainly, if you're a man, again, having young children, AI is something very positive. Women, so-so. So what about job? Do you believe, how many in here believe that a job could be replaced by an AI? That's actually pretty representative. I should say, if you ask me, I made a mistake here. I made the mistake for allowing maybe. Because maybe is a nice outcome. It's a nice way out. I don't really need to stress myself to think about this question too hard. It's a maybe. But how much maybe? Is it 50-50? Is it sort of, I don't know. But still, in terms of no. It's, I think, actually even stronger in here in terms of, I didn't ask anybody to do maybe, because it's not. So now, if you're an entry-level manager, entry-level in any company, you actually have quite some concerns. So 50% of entry-level managers or entry-level educated employees, so having a university degree, do believe that their job could be replaced by an AI. So there is quite a difference between your educational level, your age, etc. in this one, and certainly also income. Now, if you're a millennial, so you are between 18 and 40, so just here. So just again, do you believe that your job could be replaced by an AI? 80% roughly no, and 20% yes. If now I ask you, and I shouldn't have shown you this, so I'll quickly go back. So how many in here believe that their friend's job could be replaced by an AI? But I've already cheated here, right? I should have asked this before I showed you this. Isn't this fantastic? We are super safe. We're super safe. Come on, nobody can take my job. But my friends, she definitely, right? and indeed, lo and behold, I mean, I know it's still sort of 50-50, but I think it's actually quite reflective in here, even if you had seen this before. Thinking of your friends, do you believe that their jobs could be replaced by AI? Oh yeah, definitely. Isn't this wonderful? I mean, I'm not saying, I mean, of course there is a fun factor in this. I don't disagree with that. But it's interesting. It's always much easier to rationalize about somebody else's challenges and problems than your own. I think there's probably a management book in there, or Get Better book or whatever. But that's also this is that, yeah, I can say I love this shit because I don't believe it's impacting me or my friends or my family. That could actually be. And this is a problem in a society if you don't have more communication and more, let's say, real stories about what this technology can do of positive as well as negative things. And explaining what it actually could mean for people and actually start thinking about education and how do we actually, as a society, solve some of these problems that will be there. Even if people deny it for themselves, they are pretty easy to get convinced about what these problems would be for their friends, right? So why not for myself? So I think that's an important lesson. I did another study on millennials. So you're having a job, or you're applying for a job, and the first scenario is that it's an AI who's assessing you, and that AI have a 90% success rate, whatever that means. Supposedly you can interpret this as, well, if he comes back and say you have the job, he's been pretty good at assessing your prospects of having that job is high and you are capable, etc., right? So do you trust the outcome of that AI? 64% says no, don't trust it. This is a recruiter of a 90% accuracy. Which if you are reading this question, you're answering it, the way you should think about it is that, hey, if I believe I am the right one for this job, this AI would be highly likely to take me for that job because it would obviously agree with me. Now look here. And I don't know, I mean, I don't know if you have any people in from HR? No? Oh, okay. So I said, okay, you have applied for a job and you actually have a human recruiter who has a success rate of about 50%. To be honest, some recruiters, I have some good friends, imagine that, as recruiters, and they say in general their success rate, a good recruiter has a success rate roughly of flipping a coin. A bad recruiter, probably not so much. Or at least as good as flipping a coin, but it's not much better if you're a human recruiter. Would you trust the outcome? 74% trust this outcome. And this recruiter is nothing better than flipping a coin. Okay, I say better, but I'm not saying much better. Still, 50% human, 90% AI. We are more likely to go for the human than we are for the AI. And actually, there's an interesting point because again and again and again, you see that we as humans are much more willing to accept our fellow humans' errors, mistakes, biases, you name it, than for a supposedly intelligent algorithm. And it comes again. So what does that tell us? It tells us it's not going to be an easy journey. When you have AI augmentation or you have any tools and applications that are visibly AI-driven or visibly automation-driven, where the human will know that he or she is actually interacting with something that's non-human. The way, the level of acceptance there is at stake. This is part of a larger service I've done again on digital challenges and human answers. So, is the last human employee the CEO? I mean, if you go back to Jack Ma, he sort of said that, in 30 years on Forbes? Sorry, Time magazine, there would be an AI or a robot as the best CEO. So can you imagine an environment where all decision makers are replaced or substantially augmented by AI? And ultimately, do we just have this kind of white nice space and the CEO sitting on the floor and everything else is run by AIs? I mean, the answer to that, can we imagine that today? No. I mean, at least again, coming back to nobody believes that their job can be replaced except their friends. So actually 30% of C-level executives do believe that their job could be replaced by an AI, which is a surprisingly high level. Some of these guys, then you look at how they think about themselves, their ability to make decisions, which is better than anybody else in this world. And again, this comes back again and again, particularly if you're male, that there's nobody who's better than you in making decisions, obviously. So go ahead.
I think it's an interesting question, but honestly, I don't think any of us believe that this narrow AI can replace a management job. So what is the background of this question? Are we talking about a general AI or so higher intelligence AI, or the current AI algorithms? Because I don't think this can do a CEO job.
This is not talking about general AI, right? It's not talking about a super intelligent being. If you look at literature, there's been a lot of studies of, if you have an intelligent algorithm, if you have what I guess certainly that back in the 70s we wouldn't call it AI, we just call it a piece of smart algorithm or a piece of fitting algorithm to data. This data in general will be at least as good as a human in terms of inferring a conclusion and decision, or up to 20-30% better in terms of accuracy. And there are a lot of studies continuously on this in terms of how good can you possibly expect an intelligent algorithm in terms of accuracy of making a decision compared to human. Of course you need data. The less data you have, the less accurate it is. But let's admit it, as human beings, the less data we have, the more accurate, the less accurate we are as well, right? Yeah, and the problem is with us as humans, the more data we have, the more inaccurate do we become, because we use our human biases and heuristics to try to shortcut complexity and come out with something that feels right. We use our gut feel, which sometimes is right, but often wrong. So when we talk about this, is of course, there are a lot of functions in our company that finance. Do anybody? Now I already trust HR, but let's just talk about finance. Lots of finance is easy to automate. It's easy to replace by intelligent algorithms. Some of the HR functions you can do. I think in network planning, and I am by trade, I guess, or by experience, a network planner, can easily be replaced by AI. Lots of functions in terms of price setting, price strategy, what is the best and optimum price for a product, is much better done by an intelligent algorithm than a human being because of our biases and heuristics. So this is, of course, putting things a bit on the extreme. And it's also true that, is this going to happen tomorrow, that we might talk tomorrow, there will be nobody here because there will just be a computer sitting down there and looking at me? No, that will not happen, right? But it's interesting still that 30% of C-level, you do believe over time that the job could be replaced. I think, I have much more data, which is actually on my blog, that goes in and says, so if you look at the quality of data that you have, that you could apply these intelligent algorithms on, do you actually, is it enough? Is it sufficient? What about the quality of that data? Do you believe that that data is qualitatively good enough to actually fit an intelligent algorithm or anything on that? And then you have all these decisions that we all are making where there's hardly any data. Well, yeah, then you might as well just flip a coin and you have a sophisticated, but still narrow-based AI, right?
I think I understand you, and I understand that if you have a only be a manager making decision, but should also be a leader, motivating people, motivating the management team. So there should always be a human factor in management. Not only decision making on the basis of data, not only rational decision making.
You are assuming that humans are below him.
And this is also why that
There are also machines.
exactly.
Yeah, but
I mean, the thing you have Excel and you have other things, right? But no, I'm joking. But I mean, I'm saying replacing, right? But I mean, the most likely scenario for a long time and probably I don't know forever would be augmentation. So you have people that actually ask the AI or puts information to the AI. AI comes out with a suggestion, or maybe some strategic options or some options about what would be the most suitable decision to take. And you look at this as a human being with your own heuristics and your own biases, and you say, well, actually, it either confirms me or it gives me a red flag and say that decision is really stupid. You should think about something else, and you look at that. I think that's a much more likely outcome for the time being than you have something that totally replaces you, right? But it probably also means you don't need as many managers, decision-making managers, because there are many managers who doesn't make decisions but just manage. So decision-making managers you might also not need as many of as you might have. We'll see. But I agree with you. It's not only about replacement. I think it's very much about augmentation. Vicky?
Then my question actually to you, why do you think actually that AI cannot motivate you? We are already starting to have algorithms who are like personal trainers. So and people are actually treating also robots as they were other human beings. So it's not that hard, I think, to program something which can motivate you and reflect to you.
That's why I'm saying that first of all, I'm not a psychologist or sociologist, uh, but I have the feeling that if you want to, let's say, motivate a team, also in your family, you want to motivate your kid or keep the family together, and also a company can sometimes be regarded as a family. You feel that you belong to a team, you belong to a family, then my gut feeling is that you will still need a leader, a human leader, whom you can follow, whom you want to follow, whom you can trust, and not just an impersonal robot or something. Of course, I know that, okay, this is another branch of the same question, that lowly people in the US using Alexa can already, they already started regarding Alexa as a human being, so that's another story. But generally speaking, I understand that decision making can be automated and can be highly accurate by automation, more accurate than human decision making. But I would still believe that a human leader will be needed, or human leaders will be needed. Of course, if a CEO is not a leader, just a guy with an MBA degree who know how to do economic or business decision, maybe he will be replaced very easily if he has no other value added than just decision making on the basis of data, because that can be done much better by a computer. But my gut feeling is that you will always need humans.
Let me add something just if you.
Yeah. We talk about 30 years also from now, right? No.
Actually, my wife is psychologist, so I know a little bit more how it works.
So that makes you a psychologist again as well, right?
So this is basic human behavior, that there is a need leaders to handle you, and if you have requirements or if you have needs, that human needs.
Particularly if you're a Hungarian manager. I mean, I'm not even kidding you. I'm really not kidding you. There is a huge cultural difference between Scandinavian managers and Hungarian managers, and one of the differences is particularly the need to manage and control, and having very hierarchical structures. But I think you're right, because if this ever would be true, it means that we as humans have fully accepted to have our work augmented or possibly even replaced. And I think we are if you look at how we feel about this, even decision makers and even C-level decision makers, this is going to take quite some time before you actually can accept that. They would need to come up with some pretty compelling universal basic income ideas before people would accept this kind of. But I think augmentation, and actually if you look at mixed games where an AI is augmenting a player, tend to be stronger than either the players, definitely the player on his own, or even an AI on intelligent algorithm playing the game alone. So the combination between human cognition and intelligence, or sorry, artificial intelligence, seems to, at the moment, still be better than either of the two. So going into corporate decisions, AI and I. So one of the questions, and I didn't show that picture when I asked that question, of course, is would you trust an AI with a critical corporate decision? So how many in here would trust a corporate AI? Depends on what you ask it, right? But in general, sorry. I don't know if that will help actually. I get a sugar rush. I speak faster. So actually, just going so now this is an AI, but would you trust a critical corporate decision made by a fellow human expert or superior? And at least 53% would frequently always trust what a superior says. Now, this is not in Hungary, by the way, mind you, just before you. Certainly not Scandinavia. But still then, you would be surprised if you try to do this in Hungary or do that in Scandinavia. You will find this trend as well. Maybe not as pronounced as you see it here, but pretty close. Now, what if you ask the same question, but instead of having a fellow human expert or a superior to make that decision, well, only 12% would actually trust such a decision or trust a decision made by that. Now, one thing is trust, another thing is follow. So how many in here trust their superior to make the right decision? Oh, this is not fair. But I'm not his superior. This is not fair. I write this in my blue book. So, and if you go down here, never or infrequent. Why is that? It again comes back to this. Well, we know our human beings, right? We know their psychology, we know their emotions, we feel we understand them. Theory of mind in order to actually put ourselves in the place of somebody else. This is an interesting concept in neurobiology, behavioral biology, or behavioral neurology. So all of that makes it much easier for us to feel compassion and feel understanding for a fellow human being. But something that is not human? No. Definitely not. And this comes back. There's nothing really surprising in this, but it does show us that if you want to be successful in implementing these systems in a corporate domain for decision making, etc., you need definitely to do something. And actually what you will see is that we humans expect and anticipate almost perfection. Actually, we do expect perfection from an AI decision maker, where we are willing to accept pretty lousy track record from a human.
I think this is because we have decades of experience putting ourselves in the place of other humans, but AI can oftentimes, not only can we not know what's going on inside, oftentimes it makes decisions in a very funny way that may or may not be right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
it's not really I don't trust it because it's a machine, it's because I don't trust it because I don't trust the people who programmed it, basically.
Right. There is that, but there's also that it's of course, I mean, clearly an AI is not a human being, right? Or at least it works in a mysterious way, just like humans, but in a different way. So there's that to it. But there's so actually, I mean, there's been done quite a lot of research in this domain as well, and it shows that we as humans actually really expect almost perfection, or actually we do expect perfection when it comes to anything an intelligent algorithm or automated thing does for us. And this, of course, I mean, why do you think Tesla is so worried about the 2-3 accidents they've had? No, they're of course worried about the political backlash, but they're also very worried that the people that actually drives a Tesla or drives a car will start saying, whew, this is some scary shit here. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Yeah, I'm writing you down in the red book. So I know I'm starting. So AI aversion or algorithmic aversion actually is a real thing. It is also in literature something that's been studied, not so much with AI, but more with let's say, automated fitting routines or algorithms in general. So interesting enough, I mean, there's something I put on here just to make men feel very good. So if you ask a man how good is his ability to make decisions, well, I mean, clearly, and we hear, how do you characterize your decision-making skills in comparison with your peers? Well, definitely above average, right? It's the same question has been asked about driving, and again, no surprise, we all believe we are better drivers than any of our fellow drivers, and that's of course a statistical impossibility. So the interesting thing is, if you ask not to characterize your own decision skills, but your peers' decision skills, you start getting a much more balanced one. So what about women? Any guess on here? Are women worse than men? I mean, of course they are, but in this respect? Actually, not so much. So women seems to, I mean, the club clearly not below average, right? I mean, nobody's below average, that's clear. That's not so surprising, but there's a bit more balance between above average and this, particularly for men. And by the way, I would just say, if you have any money that you can invest, and you want to have a stockbroker investing for you, the worst thing you can do is to take a male stockbroker. Why? Because he is clearly extremely good at making decisions. He always makes the right decisions, and he loves to make decisions. If you look at the frequency of men making decisions and doing things, it's about 20-30% higher than women, even way beats. In stock markets, some stockbrokers, and they go to New York Stock Exchange, they've done some brilliant statistics on that, except the problem is statistical material when it comes to women, but let's just assume that they have been right. Men are actually having overall much higher losses because they trade much more frequently than women. So if you have any money you want to invest in, please make sure you ask for a female stockbroker. That's a much better chance of getting return on investment. Or let your mommy or wife deal with it, but not your husband. That's a very bad idea. So again, something that is worth considering when you look at how do you implement intelligent decision systems in your corporate segment in terms of decision making. How do you get people to adapt to that? Another thing that is always very nice to know about humans is because it's something that an AI will not do. It will not use its gut. So how do you characterize your gut feeling compared to peers? To be honest, if you look at it in the same way as I showed you before, you will actually see fairly similar. But now look here. And by the way, if you would be a C-level or be an executive, we are not talking, and I'm sorry for being biased, but typically when you talk about C-level, and as we know, we are lucky to have one in our company, but I mean in most cases that's male. This one here is not only 67, but it's actually close to 80. And you have very little average, and you have 0 below average. I mean, so we clearly are in love with ourselves, right? So if you are a C-level executive, you are so good that you also trust your gut instinctively. Of course, there's a kind of Darwinism here. To reach the C-level, it takes a couple of years, right? I mean, unless you start your own company, then you're very quickly there. But I mean, if you're a traditional, old-fashioned company such as Magyar Telekom or some other companies, you are sort of at a certain age when you reach this stage. Now, if you consistently made many mistakes that others would judge as mistakes, you would be out, right? So in the end, what you end up with, of course, is people that has been consistently good at making decisions or consistently good at explaining why the decisions were good. And why bad decisions, well, that was not their fault. And of course, when you get to that level and that old, your gut feel must be right? Because it's always been right. So you have a kind of self-confirmation, self-bias in terms of as you move up the hierarchy. If you're at entry level, you are a little bit more modest about your ability to actually feel and decide. So gut feel is also a lot of experience in that. Clearly, I'm not saying that this doesn't necessarily need to be wrong. I mean, gut feel is something very important, but it somehow also is influenced by your cognitive biases, and there's a lot of them, hundreds of them, that could make your gut feel go wrong. And when it go wrong, typically when these guys go wrong, they really go wrong. I sort of, in my past life, was doing a lot of financial modeling and looking at merger and acquisitions. And one of the things that always worried me was, shit, if I'm wrong, not just a little wrong, I'm getting really, really going terribly wrong. And I am happy that I am not where I am and as old as I am now, because if I was here, I would definitely have made some pretty big mistakes. But being here or being a little bit more modest and realistic means you're checking things over and over again because you know what is at stake. But when you get up there, you're right. That's why you're there. Right, so that's just a difference. So how important is human opinion compared to data-driven insights in your decision-making process? So interesting enough, we do cherish, and I think that's true in general, we do cherish the insights of our fellow colleagues. You see here, very important, exclusively used, and then you go down to, I don't know, I would love to, why is he relevant, or of some importance. So still, we do cherish very much the work we do with our colleagues, our fellows, etc. Even if they are much worse decision makers than we are, then we still listen to them. And there is actually, in this respect, no real difference between men and women. So who do you trust the most with corporate decisions? Your fellow humans or your corporate AI? And again, I didn't show that picture when I asked the question. So first of all, would you trust a corporate decision maker? Sorry, would you trust a corporate decision made by a fellow human whose success rate is better than 70%? And here you are, not always, so 70%. So actually, I would say as a decision maker, if you really believe you have a success rate more than 70%, you are definitely in the category of feeling full of yourself, because that's not really the case if you look at the real statistics and you are really using, as I say, unbiased analysis. So 53%, and of course, very few would not trust. So let's just turn it around. If you have an AI that has a success rate of 70% or better, would you trust that? Oh, definitely not, right? You're really on this domain. Look here. Now, we're actually talking about a symmetric situation. The only difference is, one case is an AI, the other case is a human being. Again, confirming that we are much more skeptical and we expect a lot more from an intelligent algorithm. And it also means that if we're not very careful, we can set ourselves, our product, our application up to fail. Because if it makes too many errors, people will stop using it. Or we have to be sneaky about it, like Facebook, not really telling them that there is an AI behind all this, or Google or something like that, and people just get used to using it and they don't think about it any longer. And that's, of course, the second thing. I don't know how many of you talk to your phone, but at some point things becomes natural and some of this disappears. So this is also an important thing. But if you have too many errors, if you have too many Teslas that do straight crazy things, you can kill a product, you can kill an idea before it even gets started. So again, we actually expect much, much more of AI than we do expect of our fellow humans. So in this sense, I think we are pretty realistic. So we unrealistic actually, sorry. So do we believe that humans are more objective than AI? Again, the maybe probably shouldn't have been there because it gets too easy for people to choose. But then again, definitely we are more objective than AI. Now, if any of you, just go to Wikipedia, or if you're a psychologist or almost psychologist, well, you can learn a lot by association, particularly in the younger years when you are married. If you get too many kids and marry too long, this is so long. Anyway, now let's not go into details there. If you go and read search of cognitive biases on Wikipedia, you will find an immense long list that has also been researched a lot. There's tons of literature on that, all kind of biases as a human being. And is it something we are not? It's definitely objective. And still, compared to an AI, oh, absolutely right. I mean, there's 28%, but let me say the 90 might have been no. It's sort of, but still, this is amazing. This is our expectations again. And I mean, this is one of that's actually surprised me, because I think we all know our human fellows, we know our spouses, we know our friends. There's something they're not, they're definitely not objective. We are all biased, more or less. I mean, we might not like that, but we are. If I show you a black face up here, the first thing, if I could be able to measure your brain waves, your amygdala starts charging before your brain realizes what you're seeing here. That's a classic experiment. I show white folks a black face, your amygdala, your fear center in your brain lights up like crazy. And then certainly your prefrontal cortex takes over and say, oh, haha, oh, that's nothing to be afraid of, right? This is something that was extremely useful back in the Stone Age when we had tribes. If somebody looked different than you, they were probably dangerous. And you can say you don't believe that, but this has been studied over and over, even in Holland, where people are pretty tolerant. I wouldn't use Denmark because we're not that tolerant in Denmark any longer, but in Holland, where people are very tolerant, where you ask people, you go through all the list of are you a racist, and obviously not that directly asked, but of course, super tolerant. You show them that picture, bang, it lights up. So, no, sorry, we are not that objective, but we believe we are, apparently, at least Americans believe they are. I'm sure if you asked Donald Trump, he would of course say he's very objective as well, and definitely more than AI. Interesting enough here, finally something I can point a finger at my better half of the population. Women are believing more in objectivity than men. I don't want to try to explain this, and I don't even know. It is actually statistically significant, so otherwise I wouldn't have put it up here. But that one I cannot explain, but I'm not a woman, so bear with me. So why do you do all that? You do that, of course, to understand how people feel about this, how do they feel about technology, how do they feel about AI. But we are a business. Many of us are working for businesses, many of us are working for products or products development where we would like to monetize what we develop. We would like to create convenience for people. We might even, as Facebook, connect the whole world kind of thing and believe that's something that is cool and great, or never do anything bad or evil, as Google says. But come on, we are doing this to monetize. Sure, we want to provide customers, we want to provide all of you with something cool and convenient, but we ultimately want to earn money on it. So, do we trust companies using AI in their products and services have our best interest in mind? And no, we absolutely don't. There's a lot of maybes here, and again, if I could redo this, I probably would force people to say either yes or no instead of being half pregnant. But still, in terms of no, we don't. I've done some studies, but I don't have enough material that indicates if you don't have the maybe, no is even bigger. And this is not you and me, right? This is general piece of the American population, but when you do this, I've seen that done in Germany, and I've seen that done in Holland, you would get this pretty much the same answer. So, are we confident about, sorry?
Is that question, by the way, for AI, or it's completely about those companies?
Do you trust companies?
Using expression of AI.
This is the particular about, no. So, if you ask a slightly different question about digital technologies or social media or whatever, you would get pretty much the same question. You're right. So, I mean, if you just keep it completely neutral, do you trust companies in their products and services have your best interest in mind, you would get a no. Although with AI it still comes out, I would still say stronger. But again, looking at some of the fear factors and some of the things, it's not too surprising that it comes out like that. This was still, yes, so this was done after the Facebook debacle came out, so do you bear with this? And actually what is actually really interesting but also expensive is to follow this over time. So you really should do this every quarter, or you should do this at least twice a year to see how does this actually develop. And there you actually see a polarization. You see some people getting more positive, but you also see people getting more negative. So this sort of neutral thing is disappearing. But you're right, I mean, if I would just ask in general without AI, I would get similar trend. Yeah, you're right. So what about, I mean, one thing that I have been super pissed about is, I mean, regulators, political institutions doesn't really seem to take this field very serious. It's more like, I mean, it maybe it's understandable in the US, but if you look at the European Union, I talk to decision makers and policy makers where they say, we don't really, I mean, that's maybe okay. They don't understand it, they don't know where it's going, and they want to see how it develops. but don't really have an idea. This is getting better, particularly over the last months, and it has gotten much better, particularly after Facebook, I think, has woken up a lot of politicians and policymakers, regulators. But if you say, how would you describe your level of confidence in political institutions, like government, adequately considers the medium long-term social impact of AI? So do they have our best interest? I mean, do they care about our best interest when it comes to AI and automation? And I mean, I don't think this is very surprising, but if you look at where we are in general, so actually they have 28% here has no confidence, 52 low to very low. So we talk about close to the 80, right? So women here are even more skeptical than men. It's actually quite interesting, because if you go back and look at some of the how do you feel about AI, you had a feeling that when women were a bit more careful, a little less optimistic about this, but not too pessimistic either, right? It was sort of, let's wait and see. But here women really come out as statistically more concerned, and particularly really believing that there is little policy or regulation in this area, and there should be. And I think if you look at what you can do with this in terms of wrong, you should be more concerned, and you should care more about this. The whole ethics aspect of this, which is also a cool topic, ethics of AI, not the philosophical ones, which are cool too, but really, how do you design ethical principles into an AI? How do you make sure that when you train the AI in whatever way, that it doesn't become biased? That Tricia is being told that she will not get out of jail. Our good Vernon, yes, sure, get him out and knock off another grandma and steal her back, right? So how do you make sure that when you train that AI, that's done in an unbiased and ethically safe way? I mean, it's not a lot of work actually happening. Facebook, because they had some unfortunate experience with bots that got a bit racistic. Microsoft is looking at this architecturally. How do you design this into some of the bot systems they have? But there's very little work at the moment on this. Now, folks, it's almost at the end. Thank God, probably. Do you believe that the use of AI will lead to a better world than today? Be a bit, I mean, in retrospect, it's a bit new age, and who believe that we will have a better world tomorrow? I mean, I don't know. But actually, specifically, I mean, again, and to your point, if I didn't put the word AI in there and just ask generally, I mean, it would actually be cool to say, I mean, do people believe in general that there will be a better world tomorrow? Something will lead to a better world than today. But in general, about 16% believe yes of women, and men, again, is actually, I don't know what's wrong with us, but we are very, very optimistic about the future. I mean, there must be a kind of PhD work in this, unless they have already figured it out by psychology. You should ask your wife. I'm sure Vicky will tell me after. So we sort of don't really, it's kind of wait and see at the moment what will actually happen here. But that's, if somebody comes and tells us, oh wow, this is going to be completely new and much better world, improve your convenience, and you don't have to work any longer. Oh, okay, I don't have to work any longer. Well, what about my salary? How do I buy food for my kids? And said, you know, there will be some kind of universal basic income. Okay, but I'm not so sure, right? So I don't know if people really think that far, and I think there's a lot of research you can do in this area to why is it that people actually don't believe that this will lead to a better world. But it could. If you look at the prospects of AI and what AI can give you in terms of additional convenience, give you more time, give you more accuracy, particularly in health, taking care of you as you're getting older, there's a lot of really positive things. Of course, there is also a negative thing, and you have to balance that. You have to make sure that we go in the right direction rather than the one with this technology. So, this is just, I mean, I think you all have seen there is a difference between how men and women regard this, men being much more positive in general, and women being a bit more skeptical about this. But again, it's not like they are totally denying the benefits of AI, but they're being, I think, probably more realistic. So this actually concludes my presentation. So AI aversion is a real ailment, and actually I think it's a real challenge for us in technology to try to solve that, because it is, I think, is the only way that you can actually monetize this technology and get people to use it and get some experience and learning from that. That what you develop is not just for the freaks like us, but actually also for mom and pop and our sister and brothers that might not necessarily be into this field. So the rest is just blah blah. Lots of text to read. That's homework. Read that for tomorrow. So with that, actually, it concludes my work. Thank you. Does this resonate? I mean, is this something that you think actually is important to consider?
Yeah, sure.
So again, I apologize for not having a hardcore AI presentation. Maybe you ask next time for something like that. Yeah. For me, there are these interesting gender aspects of it, and again, I mean, this if you read literature and you read Twitters, etc., there are a couple of pretty hardcore ladies in AI. I mean, something that has been brought up again and again is this sort of gender bias in how products is in general developed in a digital domain, but also, I mean, trying to encourage more women to go into this area. So go for it. So if I look in here, so just to get the discussion going, because I don't know if are we totally out of time? No. I can give another 1 hour presentation on 5G if you want to know. I'm joking. I don't know.
We have talked about the gut feeling. You mentioned the gut feeling. What does it really mean? I'm thinking a bit about that. When we do decisions about, we say it's gut feeling. It's actually not. It's also a kind of, let's say, non-conscious but decision based on the data we had previously, using our experience and those things. What I was thinking about, the difference between the machines doing decisions, either just simple decision trees or advanced AI, doesn't really matter, is the data, what they can use, and the data, what we can use. And why people may trust more people, because they believe that they have a wider set of data. Maybe they don't have so much data as a machine can have, but a much wider set, considering things which, I don't know, a machine would never consider because never perceived, never experienced. Could it be that that kind of difference, having a small set, huge amount of data, but a small set of data, or in case of a human, it's a very wide set of data? I mean, if I'm an agent at the call center, I don't consider only your data in the system. I name your number and things, but I consider your accent, your mood, your I don't know what things. Could it be one of the factors why the different perception of the machine and human decision making is trusted differently?
So I think part of it is just that it's much easier for us to relate to another human being than to something that is non-human. I think in order for, and our expectations are just much higher, because we don't judge this in a way that we would judge another human being. I think you're right that in order for AI-driven decision making to make sense, you do need data. You do need reasonably good quality data. And I think I gave you some examples where there's actually a lot of data, but the data is skewed or biased, and when you apply your model to that, when you train your model, you're actually biasing it. And the decisions it makes. You could still argue, if you go back to Tricia and Vernon, if you would ask a human judge, or let's just take a panel of judges, that might be a good experiment for my next talk. You're all judges. You just have these two faces up there, and you have to basically judge who of these two do you think would be most likely to be a repeat offender. And in many cases, you would actually see that you probably would go for Tricia rather than Vernon. I could probably make a picture of Vernon look like, well, you definitely not. But then take the two Mexicans or the two Hispanics. So the question still is, yes, certainly there are AI-based decision engines that are biased. The question, of course, you should ask yourself is, are they more or less biased than a human equivalent? Now, if you have garbage in, there will come garbage out, and it might be very similar to a human, or it might actually be worse. It really depends. I mean, we are all humans, of course. The beauty of being human is that we are all different. We are, in many respects, surprisingly similar, but also we are, thank God, different. So in a call center, ideally what you would like, because you have a lot of data, you have also a lot of data on the customer, that you could, I mean, there are bots out there that actually can have a pretty decent conversation with a customer without the customer really realizing that he or she is actually talking with a sort of natural language processed tool or a bot. And that one you can even train this one to pick up emotions in the language of the customer, and you can use all the information. Oh, I noticed that you had a bad incident in the network yesterday, or you over lately have had many dropped calls, or I see the throughput of your connection. So you can have this kind of dialogue based on data, and you can actually have a conversation that sometimes if you have the right agent. We all love the right agent, the agent that is smiling when she or he takes the phone and is understanding. But I mean, if you are in a call center 24/7, or let's say less than 24/7, but if you're in a call center a lot and you're getting all these angry customers, the chance that you're smiling at the end of the day is pretty dim. And you probably would be better off serving a bot to that customer. So again, I think as many things is not black and white. You will have situations where an AI-based engine in terms of decisions, or in terms of interfacing human, would be far better or as good, if not better, than a human agent.
My point was rather about that on the same sort of data, or the same set of data, for me at least, no question that sooner or later AI will beat human capabilities. The question is whether at least the existing or the foreseen AI models can have enough data to cope with the human thinking. Because
Okay.
when you make a decision
Right.
for your job, you are not just using a database. You are using a huge database of the past, of the present, and even some forecasts.
Yeah. So today's AI, I mean, there's no cloud. If you look at where technology is today, because we are far, far away from any general AI or even a wider AI, right? It's all very narrow. If you limit the span of where an AI operates, it tends to you can get pretty decent performance out of it. But it's not perfect. It definitely is not perfect. But a human being wouldn't be perfect either. The question I guess you have is, if you give limited data to a human versus limited data to an AI, which of the two will perform? And there has been experiments, particularly back in the 70s and 80s, which is, I think, not as advanced than some of the algorithm systems we have today. But there it indicates in general that an AI, typically if it's trained appropriately, even with limited data, would be at least as good as a human, unless the problem becomes very simple. So most of us as human beings can probably juggle about 5 to 7 individual chunks of information at simultaneously. Right? There is a limit to how much data you can actually handle, and often once it goes beyond that, your error rate goes through the roof, or you use simple heuristics to try to simplify what it is you try to cope with. But I think if you have something that is very, very simple, so something where it really is almost mathematically known what would be the next one, then you might be as good or even better with a human, because as soon as you apply an AI to that kind of data, well, actually, the reason why I'm doubting, and it sounds like I don't know what I'm saying myself, is that the argument I've often had is, why should I apply a deep learning network to simple data sets which I can describe and just a simple general linear model to fairly simple models, right? What is the best approach to describe a simple data set? General linear model, which would be ultra fast and probably also very accurate, or I take a deep learning model and I apply it to that. Now, I've seen two schools of thought. One saying you must be completely silly to apply something so complex to a simple data set. And actually, you would be much better off with a GLMM, a general linear model, or something like that. Simple stuff, right? Decision tree or boosted tree or whatever. But I've also seen studies that if you actually do a real apple-to-apple comparison and you tweak your parameters in your neural network so you get the best solution, that solution still matches the simpler algorithm to the same level of better accuracy. So then the question becomes more: do you want to spend the money or the cost of applying something complex or something that actually you can do a lot cheaper with a simpler approach? So in general, I trust. I mean, my gut feel would say if you have simple problems, simple humans or humans can solve this as well, or maybe even better than a poorly trained or even an average trained algorithm. I think that that's actually an interesting problem, and there's a lot of discussion going on there, because indeed you are right. What happens when you don't have data? What happens when the situation you look at is somewhat different from what has been in the past? Can you still apply the same kind of algorithmic methodology to that? And I think the verdict is out there. But as a data scientist, you try it, and if it doesn't work, try again. Can't say. Cool.
My point is that AI will be useful for the foreseeable future, but I think that people that are power hungry will abuse it, and it has potential for worse effects than some chemical weapons or something like that, because we don't know how to control the system is smarter than ourselves.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm just profiting from it, but aware that perhaps I'm contributing to the momentum behind this system. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, where do I stand ethically here, you know?
I'm a man, so I'm optimistic. What can I say? I believe that the next step is really to build in ethics into your AI algorithms, both in the training as well as the decision making. I think this if you can get away with that, at least in Europe, maybe not in the US, but at least in Europe, I think you would have a winning product. It might also be a way to make I don't think you can make the GDPR go away, but I think you can actually have a discussion with decision makers of you're building various protocols that safeguards privacy or safeguards security of your users. I don't know.
One reservation I have is that people don't actually understand the algorithms that are inside of these. Most people don't understand how these neural networks work, you know, and when these networks are made, it's like a black box even to the people that stitch all these layers together.
Yeah. So, but that's an interesting one, right? Because I mean, as we all need more and more data scientists and product developers that build in AI, certainly many of them will use libraries that just is having a particular deep learning architecture behind it, or you have a recursive formula in there that you use, but you don't really understand. And I mean, many years ago, I was at a training course on a cool Excel statistics tool called At Risk, and there were some people from the medical industry there. And the teachers were starting out, okay, let me just teach you some basic statistics, probability, and because he felt that was sort of important to be able to use that particular tool to analyze data. Do you know what these guys said? He says, oh, sorry, we don't care about this. We just want to learn how to use the tool. And I was thinking, okay, hey, these guys are the ones that is evaluating medical trials, is looking at lots of data. They use this tool, but they don't care about the fundamental of what does statistical significance mean. Well, the tool gives you a figure, and they just want to know, well, when that figure is bigger than this, it must be okay, right? But not, hey, well, if you have that kind of data set and you just put it in, well, you might actually get completely crap out, and that could still give you a positive result, I guess, or something like that. So do you always need to understand everything you do? I don't think so. I think that there are a lot of math that we use every day in our tools and libraries that I think many of us either have forgotten or simply never learned, and it still works okay because there are so much, let's say, experience around this, that it doesn't matter. We don't need to be an expert on everything. Maybe at some point when it comes to deep learning, in particular deep learning libraries and architectures, there will come a point where this has been used and benchmarked so many times that actually you say, okay, it's just, I just know it works for this particular situation. But you still need to know what that particular situation is.
I was at a meetup last week in London about IBM Power AI, and there was companies there that were saying we can automate AI and all this stuff. Basically, for simple data sets, you tune this little dashboard and it output, it does this trading real time and it finds a optimal point. But that's for like basic, not really neural networks, but they're even so they're automating AI. So, but the real complicated deep learning stuff, yeah, there's still a job in that firm.
Yeah, well, that's I think there are. I mean, that as you know, there's a lot of this research and development going on with having AIs, building AIs, and if you think of an ethics situation. If I'm a developer and I develop an AI, I am absolutely responsible. Ultimately, also, I might be liable if I do something that will harm my consumer or my end user. So ethically, you could argue that even if my AI is not ethical, well, it's my responsibility to whatever I develop to try to make sure that whatever comes out of that is ethical. But what happens when an AI develops an AI? So. Okay, you could argue that, well, at some point there must have been a human that actually developed AI, that developed an AI, then go right. But if we are 10 years out in the future, I mean, if it's me, I'm sorry guys, I will be long gone and 7 feet under, whatever you have to be under. So, I mean, I think some of these research going on at the moment are very, very interesting. I would say cool, sorry for that, but also to some extent scary because you don't know where that actually ends up. I don't believe that you will have this AI that will generate even a smarter AI that will generate, and ultimately you at singularity. I think we are far away from that. But you actually no longer have control over that development process. And I'm not so worried that you get a kind of super intelligent being. I'm more worried that you get something that will create a problem down the road. And as just like a DNA, that some of this might actually just be but just small mistakes or small errors in the beginning that could then knock on. But anyway, cool.
Yeah, people that made this tool were like the winners from like Kaggle Grandmasters, like top, like a few of them made this system, so they're the ones that understand what they're writing.
Well, I mean, imagine today already under AI management in the private equity industry, and you have roughly a couple of $100 billion under AI management today. The interesting thing is, so far, these companies who use AI as the only means to invest still doesn't have a positive return, still. But I'm always thinking, if we have our corporate AI here, and we tell that corporate AI that its goal function is to maximize our profit, and let's just assume that Vodafone has an AI as well. What is the best way to actually optimize the profit in the country? It is to talk to each other, right? As Adam Smith once said, when let's say competitors sit down and talk, it's not just because they like each other, but it's because they discuss about how to fix the market, how to repair the market. So I can easily imagine if you're not very careful and you have such a corporate AI, and our competitors have a corporate AI, you give them both this goal function of optimizing profit and optimize the market. These two AIs, if they know that each other exist, could even very simply start fixing the market. So that's obviously an ethical concern. It is also, how does AI communicate with other AIs, and how do you monitor that? And by the way, still, if anybody believes that AIs has invented their own language and can speak to each other, that's still fake news. But I mean, I don't necessarily need. I can just exchange data, and my models can be based on optimizing particular solutions. I don't really need them to speak their own language. I can exchange information in a way that can fix a market in a nefarious way for the consumer. So that there are good reasons why actually ethics and compliance should be much more important for this than it actually is today.
I was at Finovate in London, which is a big financial conference. So many companies are just throwing around these terms.
Yeah.
Slap on AI in the product and then up the price. we have AI in our product, you know. So
It's like the old e-commerce 99, 98, 99, 2000. Instead of blockchain. I mean, if you look at distributed ledger technology companies, it's amazing, right? It's cool technology, but if you look, it's almost like the one who had this potato salad value to a couple of $100 million. So.
By the way, have you had any data or research on the industry, how it differs, how the different questions or answers could differ by the industry, I mean, where you're working in? Like
so I do have some data in different countries in Europe. Some of that data is more done internally in telecom, and I cannot share that. And actually, the question is often is if you would do this kind of study just internally in a corporation, does that also completely reflect what the general population would come up with? So in Magyar Telekom, and you don't have to say that to anybody, it's a secret. Women is a lot in technology, by the way, so it's even more biased. So women in technology in Magyar Telekom is a lot more like men in terms of their opinion about technology. That's not surprising, as they are embedded in a hardcore engineering community. They often come from quite technical background, so they think very similarly. They are, but in pretty much all of the aspects, they are very similar to what you see here. I've done similar study both in Denmark and in Holland, and this comes out quite similar as well.
What about other industries? I mean, either public sector or I don't know, agriculture, health, whatever. Do you expect some difference by the opinions? Because
I haven't done sector. So you ask, have I done sector analysis?
Industry sector.
So in this, for example, for the US, I do know not only just people's education, but I also know the sector they're working for. And I also have because what you realize when you do the survey monkey is that there's a lot of retirees, there's a lot of pensioners who's actually respond. They're usually the first ones to respond. So typically when you do this, you see this age group, this thing. How can I ever get anything statistically significant when they're all above 70 or unemployed? I don't have enough data apart from a couple of sectors to actually really see whether there is a difference in which sector you come from, how you view this. I don't have enough data for that. But if you just talk about the difference between Europeans in general and Americans, no, there's not.
No, I was rather about the sector, the industry.
Yeah.
How the different industries or sectors viewing the same question.
So I haven't had it here, but I have one which pretty much goes across all sectors, and you do see differences. The reason why I don't show it here is that statistically, I'm always worried when something looks quite similar to what I would expect, but it's actually not statistically reliable. Am I just sort of being, well, confirmation bias, right? Well, that's exactly what I would expect. You do see in general that teachers and education is a lot more positive in terms of the job security than what you, for example, would see in the financial sector and the insurance sector, which is quite ripe for education. If you look at other sectors which deals very much with, which is very important, the human-to-human interaction, it's like education, you see people being more bullish about the job security than would be, for example, in financial or even in technology sector in general. I would say my problem with that is that this is what I sort of would expect or I can explain. The data is not really solid enough to hardcore conclude that there is a difference.
There was I think it was not based on a survey, but something else by McKinsey last year, having a graph about what is the maturity, the current maturity, and what is the, let's say,
yeah, I saw that one.
In the different industries.
Yeah.
And I was quite interested in that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that was the best way to measure it. This kind of survey, I would be interested how it looks like in different industries.
Yeah. The thing is, in order to get something that's really statistic, because no, I was thinking the same, because when I think I have seen the same survey. I was interested if I take that survey and actually use this data across this industry to do these two match up? I mean, are people worried in sectors where they shouldn't be worried, and maybe not worried in sectors where they should be worried? So there is this cognitive dissonance between your own opinion. But I mean, I think it's already quite clear that we all, I mean, believe that it's not going to hit us, but just everybody else, right? So that's already in there. So, but yes, it could be interesting. The thing is, in order to get that kind of thing statistically significant, you talk about in terms of sample, you need to be at least above 5,000 to 6,000. And my personal budget is not for that. I don't think my wife would allow me. Cool. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah.
One more thing. You mentioned that AI develop. So as AI develops, it's going to take most of the jobs away from people. At the first place, of course, it's going to affect well, let's say the more simpler jobs, for example, factories and stuff. But in the long term, for example, 40 or 30 years, what do you think how this will affect our global economy? What are people going to do, as you asked?
So the easy way out is to say I don't know. I mean, I don't know, because how can I know, right?
Any ideas?
I actually, I think what surprises me a lot is it tends to be the more educated you are, the more bullish are you about your job security, particularly within some of the very analytical areas of work. And actually, this is probably some of the areas where I would see AI really making big inroads. If you're a network planner reviewer, a network operator reviewer, this is something that is even today very easy to automate. I mean, take the example of Facebook, right? They automated pretty much 100% the network planning. So they drove a car across the city. They basically did LiDAR, so they mapped out the complete city. They put that map through a AI algorithm, an attended algorithm that tells them, hey, this is how you have to connect, for example, microwaves or radios and throughout the city. And by the way, there you have trees that is growing. You cannot put it there because then it would block. And they hardly, I mean, I think if you look at the number of engineers they have to do that, it's like a couple of engineers where we have hundreds of engineers. Now, so if you today are a hairdresser, do you necessarily need to be worried about your job? No, I don't think so. If you look, I mean, look at some of these impressive robots of Boston Dynamics, right? I don't think anybody would go near. I don't think anybody would put their head to that. If you are an engineer that works as field services, climbing up a mast and taking radios down, or you're doing something with your hands that needs fine motoric skills, do you need to be worried about this? Not for a long time, if ever. I think if you're a financial controller, or you're somebody like me that does business cases or business planning, I could argue that now I don't do that because I'm so lucky that I'm one of these 70% that always trusts his gut feel and is always right. I would be worried. I think this is things that will ultimately disappear. You don't need as many of us. You need a lot less. But on the other hand, there's also going to be new jobs. There's going to be new opportunities that we didn't think about before, because this is going to create new jobs, new opportunities, things we cannot imagine today. So I don't know. I think it is. I don't think you should love it. I don't think you should hate it. I think that's too strong emotions for something like this. But I think we need much more communication, much more understanding about how is it going to change our future, and certainly the future of our kids, because they're going to be much more impacted by this than we are. That's quite clear.
But there's, I think there will be another trend coming with the augmented reality, because last week actually I see something where you can see with the simulation when you're putting together a network, for example, what I couldn't do, but with that glasses I could do actually, because the system tells me where I could put each cable. So that will have also an impact that those people who couldn't get a certain knowledge before those people who had certain knowledge before. So it will be
Yeah.
another interesting trend
No,
that will come.
and I would agree with that. I think it's very. It's always, because otherwise, I guess we wouldn't be here if we could see the future. We would probably be at a nice beach somewhere with a nice house. But anyway, I also. I mean, one thing that worries me a lot is as you get all this technology convenience, and let's say you're not part of developing this, this means that there is much less need for your cognitive abilities today. What you have today, why should you have the size of the brain you have today? The amount of cognitive abilities in terms of understanding geometries, understanding complexity, which we have been trained around. Playing in the playground, being outside, is one of the best ways to actually train your cognitive abilities, in particular in terms of space, in terms of geometry, right? If you're bicycling, if you look at people who have never bicycled compared to people who have been biking a lot, you see in terms of geometrical sense and feel is so much better than somebody who has never been biking. If you are all the time getting everything served for you, we are human beings. I mean, we are by default trying to minimize the energy our brain spends, right? Because it spends a lot of energy. So anything we can minimize. What happens to your brain? I mean, there is this movement of transhumanism where we all believe there will be a kind of singularity and we will be so much more than we are today. I am actually not. I think there's a different path which goes in the other direction, where people will actually get increasingly dumber because they don't need to have the same cognitive abilities as they have today. Maybe if Elon Musk is right, you will just have a kind of brain interface that deals with all this, but it still means that your biological brain, your biological capabilities will decline, because human nature over several generations will get rid of what's not really needed, or at least diminish what's not needed. And this is a trend that I don't think we have to be worried about over the next maybe 30, 60, 90 years, but certainly over a time scale of hundreds of years, that could be a path as well. And I don't think we know enough about that to really understand. I mean, and of course, again, that's what I always say. It's like Donald Trump, right? He doesn't care shit about what happens in 20 years, or maybe not even 10, not even 10 years, not even maybe 8 years, right? Because why should he? He's probably long dead, definitely long divorced. But that's the same with greenhouse effect. There's a lot of things that might not affect us today, but I think we should think about, because it will certainly affect our future generations. Wow. I cannot imagine myself having said that 20 years ago. Look what age does to a person. Anyway, thank you very much. Cool questions.